Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dawn Cordero, and I am the EVP of Operations for Pamela. I have the true pleasure today to introduce our Series 3 Latino Talk, Our Story, Our Journey, a conversation about diversity. I'd like to take just a brief moment to introduce today's moderator, Susan Santana, who will have the opportunity to introduce herself on a grander scale in just a moment. Susan was appointed Vice President of Legislative Strategy for AT&T California in January of 2020. She will be today's moderator of our distinguished panel that you can see on the screen. Susan, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dawn. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you. Bienvenidos y buenas tardes. So my name is Susan Santana, and I have really the distinct honor, pleasure of joining you all today and of moderating this very important conversation around the diversity. And I would put in parentheses, a conversation about the diversity of the Latino community. Because I know there's so much conversation going on about diversity in general, but we're really going to narrow it down to within the Latino community and what lessons we have to learn and share for the company more broadly. So I grew up in Chula Vista, California, which is a southern suburb of San Diego County. It's about as far south you can go without crossing the border. And so, you know, my grandparents immigrated there from Mexico in the 1940s. So I grew up in a very bicultural, bilingual, and actually bipartisan family. My father was a Republican. He was in the armed service. My mom was a Democrat. She worked in the schools. So there was always this bridging of different worlds that I grew up accustomed to, that I think a lot of us in our community could relate to. My parents divorced when I was about 13. But they always pushed education and hard work as sort of pillars and values, not only of our family, but I really believe of the entire community where I grew up. And then I'll say, you know, I was fortunate enough to go to UC Berkeley for undergrad and blessed to have a UCLA law school as my other experience in completing that postgraduate program. I never imagined myself working in Washington, D.C. Lobbying for Congress was never a career that popped up in anyone's mind, not in my home, not in my community, not in my world. And so after graduating from law school and getting blessed to serve on receiving an internship with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, that's what first brought me to D.C. I think they even paid for my first ticket to D.C., and I loved it and I stayed. And so I had the privilege of practicing law there and then working for AT&T for the last 13 years. The last 10 were in the Legislative Affairs Department in Washington, D.C. My good friend Lichia is on the panel today. She was my neighbor across the hall. And then last year, I got this amazing offer to move back to California, to my home state. I was thrilled with the opportunity to pursue that. It was a dream come true to take a promotion and elevation in the company in my home state, right? And this would be in Sacramento, and that's where I am now. That's where I am today. Of course, this was all before COVID. So the job that I thought I was taking and accepting is much different than the job and how it's actually turned out to be. But, you know, I continue to rely on my family for support, my broader network of sisterhood, my wolf pack, my Latina sisterhood, my broader sisterhood, and really a lot of the colleagues of AT&T that have been so extremely supportive to get us through this very challenging time that everyone is going through. But I will say one thing, and then I want to turn it over to our panelists so they can do their own introductions. When I moved to DC, it really expanded my view of Latinos. Growing up on the border, I just thought everyone who spoke Spanish was Mexican, right? That was the world, that's all I knew. And so coming to DC, moving to the East Coast really broadened my own personal understanding and appreciation of how Latinos come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, languages, accents, you know, food preferences, and cultural norms. So I just kind of wanted to set that table for us to continue. And I'd love for each and every one of you to get to know our panelists today because they really represent the vast beauty and richness of our Latino culture. So let me go ahead and turn it over to Lichia Leon if you want to do your self-introduction. Welcome, Lichia.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Don and Hacemos for having me here today. My name is Lichia Leon. Okay, can you hear me now? Perfect. Sorry about that, double muted. My name is Lichia Leon. I immigrated to the United States when I was 5 years old with my family back in 1994. And at the time we had immigrated to New York, which is a very, very diverse, I guess, center. It's the melting pot of the United States. And we lived in Rye, which is a very non-diverse city within New York. And at the time, I knew there was a Bolivian community, but I had no idea the different amounts of communities, of Hispanic communities in New York until I went to college, and that's when I really diversified myself and created my sisterhood, as you said, Susie. So I started off my career in New York at the DirecTV Latin America office. I was first in the legal department, so shout out to all my DirecTV Latin American legacy employees that are still with us and are on this call. At the time, I had no straight career path. I was just exploring. I was exploring the corporate world. I was trying to see what was out there. Growing up, I didn't really know anybody that worked at AT&T or that was within the corporate world, so I couldn't really see myself in it. And it really opened up my eyes to the opportunities that were out there for us. After legal department, I worked in the corporate social responsibility department for a few years, so about 4 to 5. And that's what really caught my interest in the corporate world and seeing everything that we do to not only raise the reputation of our company, but to make sure we create an impact within our communities. Currently, I work in the Global Public Affairs Department, still dealing with corporate social responsibility issues, which I love. And that's a little bit about me. I'll send it over to one of the other panelists.
Let's go ahead and move down to Martin Mesa.
My name is Martin Mesa.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, got it. Thanks. So my name is Martin Mesa. I am actually Mexican American. I am first generation born here. I come from a very large family. I am lucky number 7. My parents migrated to the U.S. in 1970 with 5 of my siblings. I am a gay Latino, which has not been very easy to do, right? Growing up in Santa Ana, I have 23 years with the company. I currently do diversity marketing within the West region, and I've been a part of Hacemos for the past 20 years. I currently sit on the board of Our Small World Foster Agency, and then my fiance and I live in Santa Ana with our 2 dogs. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you, Susie.
Welcome. Thank you, Martin. Let's go over to Miriam Inocencio.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Really excited to meet my fellow panelists recently and learn so much more about them. So I think it'll be a really great time today. A lot of you know me. I'm Miriam Inocencio. I'm Director of Design Technology. I've been with AT&T about 5 years. The daughter of 2 immigrants. My father came here from Cuba well before Castro took over. And my mother came here from Peru. And I was born and raised in New York City. Actually born in the projects, and for all of those of you who don't know what that is subsidized housing in New York. I subsequently was raised in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, which is known for many street gangs when I was growing up. And I played with some street gang folks that called themselves the Assassinators, naively believing that it was a joke or, you know, these guys trying to sound really tough. My father was super strict. And as a Latin father, he believed that women should know how to cook and clean and respect the man of the house. It was really important for him. And I would ask consistently, what do I need to do so that you can stop telling me what to do? I was the 4th of 5, so that was a bit of a struggle for him as well as for me. But what he said to me was that I had to get an education. and I immediately asked if I could go to school every summer from there forward. I graduated valedictorian from my elementary school. I was sent to do middle school in 2 years instead of 3. I then tested to get into a high school called Murray Bergstrom High School for Business Careers, which is right actually next to Wall Street in New York. Education really never stopped for me, and it's become really a central part of everything that I do. It's not always formal education. Sometimes it's learning through new experiences and new cultures, going to new countries, living overseas a bit. Anything where I can kind of learn and grow. I think for a very long time, I didn't realize I lived in one of the most diverse bubbles that I ever could imagine. And then I moved to Dallas. I was recruited from NYU to the least likeliest contender, American Airlines, who relocated me here. And I was thrilled at the opportunity to raise a family here. I thought, I'm going to learn some new lessons here in the middle of the country. And while housing was infinitesimally less expensive than New York, the lack of diversity would absolutely teach me some new lessons. From being asked if I was the owner of my home, from being asked if I lived in this community and could they see my driver's license, being asked if I was Mexican, being asked if I prefer the label Hispanic, Latina, or Latinx, most recently, actually within the last month. My opportunity is one where I feel like I can teach others and share with others to really open the minds of other people to understand who we are as Latinos, the diversity around us, so that I can answer the questions to folks. Yes, I am the owner of this home. Yes, I do live in this community. And no, I will not show you my license. I'm very fortunate to be where I am. I look forward to today's talk and learning more about everybody else.
Thank you, Miriam. I appreciate that. Let's turn it over to Pamela Osborne.
Hi, I'm Pamela Osborne. I'm currently an AVP in public sector and FirstNet. I'm doing sales execution and transformation. Fortunately, I'm an Air Force brat, so I kind of grew up all over the country. I was born in Hawaii. My mother is Puerto Rican. Her parents came here in the 30s. My father is African American. I've lived in Germany and Japan, but I call New Jersey home. I've lived there most of my adult life until I was relocated here to Texas about 7 years ago now. Went to college in Indiana at Indiana University, Bloomington, and also went to law school at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. Undergrad degree was in journalism, ended up going to work for Bell Atlantic, which became Verizon, then went to CenturyLink. At the time they were Quest Communications, and then landed here at AT&T in 2000. So I've kind of been all over the place with the big three and have had great experiences as far as career has gone. But for me, it's been interesting because I don't look typically like your normal or what we see in the media as Latino, and have been asked, how are you Latin or how are you Hispanic? And having to explain that, I'm fortunate enough to come from two cultures, very rich cultures, and the merging of those two cultures. My mother is Puerto Rican, my father is Black, and what that looks like. But there are people in the Caribbean, there are people in Puerto Rico, in Brazil, in Cuba, that were the whole range of colors. And I think that that's what I think is important for us to talk about and for this conversation and others, because I believe that gets lost a lot in our day-to-day conversations and what we see in the media.
And luckily we have a whole question around that coming right up. So before we begin the formal kind of Q&A interview conversation part of this, we are so lucky and blessed to have received a video earlier, either last night or this morning, from our very own Chief Diversity Officer, Corey Anthony, and we are going to turn it over right now to the video. I think he brings a very important message to share to this group. And so let's go ahead and roll that video.
Hi, everyone. I'm Corey Anthony, Chief Diversity and Development Officer at AT&T. I would like to start out by commending the Hacemos employee group for their leadership in making sure that we take the time to listen, understand, and act in order to deepen our knowledge and appreciation of the Latino community. Finding ways to connect like this helps us all realize that our differences do not have to be a barrier. They can actually be a bridge that brings us together because we are all people first. Now, more than ever, we have a responsibility to do the work that's required to advance diversity and inclusion within our organization and in the communities that we serve. Through conversations like the Latino Talk series, we're doing just that. At AT&T, it's the voices and actions of our employees that help us learn and grow, and above all, make sure that we are living up to our value of standing for equality. I know things look a lot different in 2020, and it has been a really difficult year. The truth is, there may be more challenges ahead, but I want you to know we are deeply committed to a culture of inclusion that makes each one of you feel that your place is right here at AT&T. Hispanic Heritage Month is a time to reflect on the incredible contributions Latinos make every single day to our country's social and economic success. But this year especially, it's an opportunity for us to go beyond this moment in time and really focus on the importance of advancing awareness, inclusion, and equity within our own company. Looking ahead, I encourage you to think about what you want the future to be and the role that we all can play as individuals and as an organization in making that equitable and inclusive future a reality.
Thank you so much. Corey, that was amazing. Great message. You know, it's funny, I talked about how we're accustomed to living in dual worlds, multiple worlds. And so he touches upon that theme of bridge, and the bridge not being, differences not being barriers, but differences being that bridge. So that's a wonderful theme for this panel today. And speaking of this wonderful, exciting panel today, you know, everyone who's watching or listening sees that, you know, we have folks here that are newer to the company, to those that have been with the company for a while, in all different various capacities and departments within the company, and just as importantly, from various backgrounds, various parts of the country, with various countries of origin to bring to the table. So I'm thrilled with the diversity, because this diversity of the panel really epitomizes and is evidence of the richness and the diversity of our community. So let's go ahead and start kind of digging into the juicy conversation of the diversity of the Latino community, with the hope that you know, we come back learning something new, and hopefully that those within our company at the higher levels in HR and that are dealing with our culture transformation will be able to learn from this conversation and incorporate some of those findings into their efforts and into their initiatives. But let's begin with that threshold assumption, that real baseline assumption that people make when they think about Latinos. That common assumption is that we're all alike, right? That we're this monolithic community, that we must all be whatever it is, fill in the blank. However, as we've witnessed and as evidence on this panel, we're all very different. We're all very much formed by those experiences, and each of our different journeys adds to that richness of our community. And in fact, I would also you know, say that a lot of the current events, a lot of the current difficult, challenging of social justice events tragic events that have been happening in our world today has caused us to think about how can we bridge differences, right? How can we unify rather than divide? And a lot of these current events, you know, of course, come from socially imposed inequities that disparately impact people of color. And so even within the Latinx community, there is a notion, we all know that we belong to the community of color, But colorism has really been a taboo issue historically. I know I could tell you from personally from my, a couple of different sides from, my grandmother's experience, completely not very open to the various colors within our community. And that's something that I've had to push back on. And then on the other side, personally being told, so often, you don't look Mexican. And it was so offensive and hurtful for someone to tell me that I do not look Mexican because I feel like I'm as Mexicanas as they come, right? And it's disrespectful to my grandmother and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles who raised me. But there's this, it just reemphasized, there's this notion that, the Latinos or Mexicans have to look and feel this one particular way and fit into this very small box. And so even within the Latino community, the Latinx community, we need to have these conversations. How are we embracing and leaning into the beautiful richness of color and different backgrounds of our Latino communities? So I know, Pamela, you started to touch on this, so I really want to take it over back to you because you really opened the door for how should we as a community better lean into this and better eliminate the colorism that exists and really embrace the beauty and the richness of our very diverse and colorful, beautiful community.
Well, thank you for that question, Susan. I think that we really have to start to look at representation. Representation matters, whether you're Latino, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're Asian. And if we're not seeing all of the rainbows of our very rich culture and color in media and advertising, if the standard of beauty or what's normalized for Latinos is only one color, then it makes people feel in our community that either they don't matter or they're not being seen, or that vision is better than any other vision. So I think that we have to really make sure that we're vocal and we're intentional on how we communicate and point out not only, whether it's at AT&T or where we shop or what we're viewing on TV or in the movies, that we require that we see the whole scope of what the Latino community is. And I don't, while we're doing a better job of it, there's still a lot of room and work to be done there. It's interesting, when you pull up a magazine or you go to a website and you literally see nobody that's outside of a certain color within our community. And then it gets questioned, when people ask you, Afro-Latino, what does that mean? I know that it was a phrase that caught me off guard the first time I was reached out and somebody said to me, I hear you identify as Afro-Latino. Had no clue what that meant, actually, because I never actually identified as that. But the more I dug into it, the more I understood it. And you really start to have those conversations. While it shouldn't be the focal point of the conversation, it is something that does need to be discussed and brought to the table, that in every community, there's a range of beauty and color among us, and that our paths are not always the same. Our backgrounds may be connected in some ways, but very diverse in other ways. And that we should be embracing that and welcoming people into the conversation, not dividing, especially amongst ourselves. And I think that that's the even broader conversation. We may not be seeing representation from the media or from others, but we also do some of that to ourselves too, and acknowledging that and having forums where we can talk about that and expose people to that, I think is a good starting point in bringing people together. And we're stronger, because in the end, we come to the table with a lot of buying power, a lot of contributions, and we're stronger together. And especially in this political season even, our voices need to be heard, and we need to be at the table, all shades, all colors, all backgrounds.
And don't you guys think, and so I want to open it up, if anyone else on the panel, if you're like me, whenever you see marketing materials, whenever you see the diversity and inclusion report, and there's a collage of faces, don't you look for yourself? Don't you think, like, which one of those represents me? Right? I feel like that's the gist of it. And so if we're doing that internally, imagine what our customers are doing outside of AT&T. Imagine what stakeholders, you know, coming from the legislative affairs world, are looking for in our company. You know, if we are going to take a leadership role in diversity and inclusion, they're going to look at that too. Those images matter. Anybody else would like to comment on this notion of colorism? Any experience that you've had with colorism, you know, impacting our Latino community?
I think I would like to take it, yes, I think I would like to take it a step further. I think that right now, because of everything that's going on within our country, there is a spotlight on how Latinos, we don't all look a certain way, and we're not all from the same country. Not just Black and white, but I think also lighter colored Latinos to indigenous looking Latinos. So I think that there's also that spectrum that we need to be aware and we need to talk about more.
So true. Thank you for bringing that up. And everybody has so much, you know, to offer. And we really need to bring all those, in order to make those bridges possible, all those experiences are critical. But thank you for raising that one, because that is very prevalent within the Latino community. So let's shift gears to our second question. Again, these are sensitive, these are not easy conversations to have, but if we can't have them amongst ourselves in a safe environment, then no one else can, right? And part of what I hope is in having these conversations, not only that, you know, we can continue them within the Latino community, but also in the non-Latino community, because I really feel that in order to build a strong Latino community, we also have to build strong allies. And those are the non-Latinos. And I know a lot of non-Latinos who are allies, strong allies, who are leaders of Hispanic organizations, even though they're not Hispanic, who are big supporters of Latino kids, even though they don't have Latino kids, right? And so how do we build those non-Latino allies as well? So part of this conversation is to perhaps, you know, give others tools and you know, words to use when sharing these common goals. But next month, speaking of allies, next month it marks the beginning of Equality Month, as many of you know, which advocates for equality predominantly in the LGBTQA community. And so when it comes to Latinx culture, you know, Martin, you already touched upon it. You opened the door on this issue. You know, do you feel we are on par? You know, how do we rank in terms of a community? How does the Latino community, common Latino conversations rank in that spectrum of the equality conversation? Have we arrived? Are we there yet? Do we still have a lot of work to do?
I think we have a lot of work to do, right? Me duele decirlo, but unfortunately, we're not there yet, right? I think that, you know, today's youth, the millennials, are really challenging us. I will tell you, you know, being in a Latino community and being gay is not accepted, right? So I think it's very difficult to come out to your family. And I think it's very difficult for your family to accept you, right? So it's not something that, you know, they embrace quickly. You know, having myself being Catholic, right? I think, you know, they're very involved in the church and stuff. So it's very, very challenging. You know, I can speak from personal experience. My family, even though they've accepted me, it's still this taboo that, you know, I'm gay. You know, they're afraid, right? So we do have some deep conversations as a family as to how we can get through it, right? They've accepted my fiance, you know, so it's been a little bit challenging stuff. So I think there's still a lot of work that we need to do as a community. You know, I think a lot of it, you know, you know, I can speak for myself, right? I think my mother's very old-fashioned, very old school. They don't evolve with time. I think lack of education doesn't really help them and stuff. But, you know, she's open, and I think my family's been pretty open and stuff, but I think as a community, we still have a lot of work to do. There's that whole machismo, right? So it's like, if you're a man, you need to be a man. So I think, you know, there's certain barriers that we still have to break as a community, but I think that today's generation is really forcing us to kind of think outside of that. So, they're really challenging us. There's now this whole thing of, transgender. So that's a whole nother realm that we have to deal with and stuff. But I think, little by little, I think we're breaking down those barriers. I think as you start seeing some of, artists that are coming out that are Latinos, that kind of, they see a whole different vision of what a gay Latino can be and stuff. But unfortunately, we're not there yet, Susie. I think there's still a lot of work that we need to do. But, today's youth is really forcing us to kind of think outside that box.
And I think for those of us that are parents, I have a 14-year-old son. I have always made it a point to include in every family reunion, birthday party, gathering, my closest, because I have close gay friends. I think we all have close gay friends. To my wedding, to the birthday party, to special dinners, and invite their partners. So that my son at a very young age, it's the
norm.
This is our extended family. This is the norm. So I think part of it is incumbent on parents and how we raise the next generation of kids too.
Agreed.
In Latino families. So I understand we might have a question on this topic. Dawn, can you fill us in?
Yes, we do. So we have a question in from Jorge Martinez, and his question is, we often see a lack of Latinos helping other Latinos. Do you also see this issue, and how can we bring all Latinos together?
Very good question. I'm not sure if Jorge's question is regarding the LGBT community and specifically, but certainly broadly, we can speak to the need for Latinos helping Latinos. Can you all share maybe an experience or a tip for someone who is looking for help within the company? And I know this was going to be one of our questions. What tip or advice would you give someone who's looking for mentorship or assistance in advancing within the company?
I'm happy to start
Miriam,
that one off.
Please.
Absolutely. I think a big part of what you have to do is build your network. And as Latinos, one of the gifts that we have is this idea of family, and family being kind of anyone that is within our circle. I know I'm honored. I actually looked through the guest list, and several of the folks that I would call familia are online, to thank them for joining. But I think it's, you have to take that action. Your career is not as important to anyone else than yourself. And so you can't just sit back and wait for that promotion, or wait to be told to take a class, or kind of wait on someone pushing you forward. You need to take that action. You need to start building that network of friends across business units, across all of the areas that you might be interested in. I actually believe I know Jorge, and we met actually through MESA, which is one of the programs that ASEMA puts together, and he asked me to help with that. And I've continued it because it actually lets me see people throughout the company that I wouldn't normally be exposed to with the work that I do. So networking, I would say, would be at the top of the list.
Absolutely. And, the funny thing is, before this call, I had a call with my first mentor when I first joined the company 13 years ago, Carmen Nava. And she was one of the most high-ranking. I know you guys remember, Carmen retired a couple years ago, but she was one of the highest-ranking Latinas in the company. And I'll never forget meeting her and going to her office. And the first thing she did is she walked me up. This is in Dallas. Walked me upstairs to where all the officers sat. And here I am, a lowly AVP, had just started in the company. And she's introducing me door by door to all these very high-level executives. And I thought, wow, the courage, the confidence that she had. And she's like, here, meet my mentee. She just started with the company. So there's also steps. So it's two-sided, right? It's as the person looking for help, be diligent about identifying folks, setting up calls, having an agenda on those calls, and having multiple mentors. And then if you are a mentor, everybody should be, right? Everybody should always have a hand back behind you, lifting up. What are you doing to further those mentees, right? Are you introducing? Are you thinking about opportunities for them? Are you connecting whenever you can? But that just reminded me. And Jerry Fuentes was another wonderful mentor who knew how to say, okay, these are the people you need to know, Susie. Boom, 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 boom. Because it really really boils down to relationships often, right? Any other tips that anyone else would like to share? Lichia, Martin, Pamela.
One of the things, hi, it's Pamela. One of the things that I consciously have always done in my career is to build a board of directors. And that obviously, as Miriam said, starts with networking, but really kind of sitting down each year and figuring out like what is top priority for you? Like what are the top 5 to 6 things you want to accomplish both personally and professionally? And then if it's working in a new area or getting a new experience, do informational interviews. It's always easier to get to know people and learn about their area of the business when you're not necessarily really looking for a job in that moment. Because you can be more yourself, more relaxed, and really concentrate on building those relationships. But then out of that, you can kind of build your board of directors who you can go back and bounce things off of, and they begin to know you. Because the networking has to get to the point of sponsorship, and that takes some time to get to and some effort, some intentional effort on our parts to go and do that. So I think it's that being very intentional, writing down, making decisions about what you want to do and how you want to do it, and then going out and finding out about those different parts of the businesses and building those relationships.
And I would add building the relationships of trust, because I know in the legislative affairs world, you know, we have to build strong relationships with policymakers. We can't just show up on day one and say, hi, Assemblywoman, I need you to, you know, vote yes on this bill for AT&T. They're like, who are you, right? But if you build over time these relationships of trust, of positive, getting to know each other genuinely, authentically, the family, the kids, when there is an issue or there is a problem, you can call them up and say, oh my God, I need your help, Senator, or whatever, right? You know, I'm blessed to be part of this wonderful women's leadership circle. And, you know, we're reading this amazing book, Dare to Lead, that I recommend to everyone. But one of my circle members on this team, she runs the Access group. And I had this presentation I had to do with the Department of Education for the state superintendent. And one of the topics was going to be this Access group. And I remember thinking, I have all these questions that are really detailed. Who do I know? Who do I know? And I thought, oh my God, Summer. And so I called her up, and right away she was there, and yes, boom, boom, boom. And I was able to get the latest, greatest information and deliver it. But if I didn't have that relationship with Summer, I would have been lost, right? I would have been sending an email to 10 people and no one responding, or maybe one person responding. Can you hear me okay? I feel like I've lost something. Okay. Okay, so any other tips? Really, this is on advice. Or we've sort of pivoted already to the question of what advice would you give to a newly hired Latino employee that could help them succeed and get noticed by AT&T leadership? I know you all have. I know on this panel, Miriam spoke. She's been there. She's been with us 5 years. Lichia, you've only been a few years as well. Martin and Pamela, you know, 20 plus years. But what other advice would you offer? Lichia?
I would definitely say don't be scared to speak up, and also don't be scared to ask questions. Because when you ask questions, not only, you'll sound maybe not educated in the topic, but at the same time, you'll sound like you are interested in the topic and you want to learn more. So I think that will top the first, initial response that you think that everybody is thinking about. And if you don't feel comfortable asking asking a question during, a conference meeting or anything like that in front of, 10, 15 people, pull somebody on your team aside, somebody that you trust, and ask them the question, and then build up your confidence that way. I would also say join Hacemos. Hacemos is a great sisterhood, brotherhood, familyhood, everything. I joined Hacemos about 2 or 3 years ago once the whole DirecTV merger settled down and we learned about what Hacemos was. And I think that it's been great in terms of meeting people, networking, and knowing that there are other people that look and sound like you in all levels of the company.
That is so true. as I was past president of the DC chapter of Hacemos, and so often you guys were my go-tos, right? I was new in my job, and there was always an Hacemos member, right, that worked in any of the number of departments that I needed to locate or work with or engage in. So I love Hacemos. Great plug. And also for non-Latinos, right? Hacemos is open for non-Latinos. Martin, are you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think, from my personal experience, I would say speak up. Like for me, my parents always instilled in me to work hard, right? So I typically would come in and just kind of put my head down and just work hard. And to me, I kind of figured that's how my boss is going to know that I'm a hard worker, right, and kind of get me to the next role. I think you need to let your intentions be known. So you need to have a conversation with your immediate supervisor as to what are the goals that you want to accomplish within the next, 2 to 3 years and stuff. And, you can still put your head down and work really hard. But if you don't make your intentions known, people aren't going to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you're next for the next job. So I think you just have to let your intentions be known and continue to work hard.
There's another characteristic that's very typical, common in the Latino community, and it's humility, right? I know many of us were raised with that. I know that's what my mom taught us. You're always humble, no matter how high you advance or how much wealth or whatever you accumulate, always humble, always give back. In corporate America, that could cut both ways, right? Because in corporate America, they value certainly successes, but how do they know you're succeeding if you're not telling someone that you're succeeding, right? And so to that point about speaking out, I would also add, don't be afraid to write an email with, this is what I accomplished this week, boss, right? Or this is, I just had this really challenging call, meeting, whatever, and these were the outcomes. Just reporting out and keeping your accomplishments, and your efforts and initiatives front and center within your supervisor's mind, I think that's going to go a long way. So it's not really tooting your own horn. It's really just sharing information about how you're moving the organization forward and your team, helping your team advance. Anyone else that wants to give a tip that I haven't called on yet? Okay, I think we've covered that one. So recently, I'm going to turn over to our almost our final question, but recently, John Stanky, as you all know, our president, delivered a message recognizing gaps in diversity within our leadership. So we were well represented broadly, non-management and management, but when you zeroed in on management, it wasn't such a rosy picture. And as part of that, we're also embarking on this cultural transformation, right? So what are the gaps, and are the gaps in how the company views Latinos, and how can Hacemos assist in filling those gaps? I'm thinking that we each have these superpowers, these abilities to bridge differences, different groups, different teams. How can we share some of our cultural learnings, cultural experiences, our own superpowers with the broader AT&T network? How can Hacemos be that bridge to help Mr. Stanky and our leadership team move the ball forward, filling the diversity gaps that we've already seen thanks to the transparency, and also moving forward with our cultural transformation? Let me go ahead and start with, if you raise your hand, I will call on you first. Miriam.
Well, that was pretty easy. I think one of the interesting things that I've learned about Warner and actually about a few other companies is this notion of employee business groups. We have our ERGs here and Hacemos. It's really great that we have it, but it's really involving these groups in business decisions, in kind of even beta testing, and we don't seem to leverage our ENs and our ERGs very well to do that. I have an opportunity to work with our researchers, and we play these third parties to find people to actually test, use, and get feedback on our services and products. And I just feel that there would be a great opportunity to use this diverse group of people who obviously want to be engaged and use them from a business perspective. I think that not only would it be helpful for the groups, but it would also be helpful for the company to see actually who all of these folks are that are going beyond their work day and actually offering up their volunteer time and efforts for the company.
That's absolutely right. I think the company probably pays, hundreds of thousands of dollars to focus groups, consumer facing focus groups. And I just keep thinking we're the perfect focus group for what Latino consumer tastes, preferences, trends are. And so absolutely engaging. Martin, are you aware of any efforts where Hacemos has been partnering with the business? I feel like there have been.
There have been. I think it might have been back in like 2009, 2010. I think we were reviewing some of the Uverse demo content, and I think we did rely on Hacemos members to kind of give us some feedback. Did we have the correct channel lineup and stuff? So that's a good point, Miriam. And I think the other thing too that I think Hacemos needs to do is really hold our advisors a little bit more accountable, right? I think today they kind of just counsel us on what Hacemos should be doing, but I think what we should be doing is sitting at the table and saying, no, advisors, this is what you need to do for Hacemos, and then you need to take that up to senior leadership. So Anna and Don, that's for you guys.
That's a great point. Any other thoughts about how Hacemos can be integrating more into the business, or more broadly, how Hacemos can help bridge some of the diversity gaps in the conversation that the company is currently having? I'm thinking even the way the company talks about Latino issues, right? I haven't heard a lot of conversation about, the Afro-Latinx community. And so maybe, again, these are ways that we can help share the language and encourage our non-Latino allies to participate and really rely on us, use us, right? We're all willing and able to be contributors in this effort. So yes. And so that brings us to sort of the final question. It's very much connected. If Mr. Stanky and the leadership team were to ask us for like specific ideas on how to increase the number of Latino managers, really taking a look at how there is a gap, there's a shortfall in terms of when you get the broader Latino population of eligible perhaps managers and how it's not on par. What would you say to Mr. Stanky and our leadership about how to, go about what steps can be taken to at least to begin addressing the shortfall or the gap within Latinos in higher ranks of leadership?
I would say you have to be intentional, Susan. We're as a business, we're very focused on numbers. We're very focused on what the deliverable is. And I think, while you don't want to use the word program, you have to make sure that people, and I don't want to steal from my panelist partners, but I believe it was either Miriam or Lichia that said yesterday, we don't want you to be unconscious. We want you to be conscious. We want you to be intentional. And I just thought that was so beautiful, and it really hit for me that that's what's got to happen. We've got to demand that we're having these conversations and that the steps behind them are intentional and measurable.
And measurability is key, right? In any other area of our business, if we want to accomplish something, we're going to measure it every step of the way. We're going to start with the baseline, which to me was the diversity survey, where we actually received, raw data and real numbers of the snapshot today. And then like every quarter, just like any sales goal, just like any corporate goal, we should be measuring against where we want to be. And if that takes, encouraging managers to look at available Latino candidate pool, high potential pool in every opportunity that exists out there, whatever it takes, right? Those would be some ideas. So I think we're kind of running up to the time where we need to turn it over to Q&A or questions. Am I right, Dawn? Keep us on track, please.
Yes, we have a couple of questions around the same topic, so I will kind of bundle them up and pose them to the panel for open Q&A session. So our first, I want to say statement and follow up with a question. So we have an attendee on today who, in their organization, they are just one of a handful of employees that identify as Latino or Hispanic. And so there have been several questions put in the chat room is, what are we doing to increase diversity when there's really no pipeline? How do we get that diversity into the pipeline?
That's a really good question.
If I may answer that, I think that relates back to what we were all just talking about, holding leadership accountable for creating these opportunities. At the end of the day, it's opportunities that we as Latinos need to not only show our supervisors, but show their supervisors that we can get the job done and that we are reliable and that we are smart and that we deserve, whatever promotion or praise comes our way, and that we're not just there to fill a seat.
Yes, I can hook on to that. I think it's, and Pamela, thanks for bringing up that conscious inclusion, which I talked about a little bit yesterday. We talk a lot about unconscious bias, and to me, it just almost sounds like an excuse. This is something I'm not thinking about, and it's so inactive and passive. But to have conscious inclusion and be action oriented to make sure you're including folks that are outside of the normal pool, I think is super important. But on top of that, even thinking about going from mentorship to sponsorship, I think we have a lot of mentoring programs that are really good, and some of the leaders are awesome. I think that we really need to step that up and have some sponsorship programs where we hold our leaders accountable for bringing up people, not just kind of giving advice, but actually lifting them in the company.
And I think it starts with sort of micro actions, right? So there's the big action of advancing someone, promoting them. But what are all the micro actions that have to happen before that happens, right? So taking someone out to lunch that you normally wouldn't have lunch with, asking someone on your team that looks different than you to lead a certain project or to fill in for you when you can't be there. It gives them an opportunity to shine, gives them an opportunity to develop relationships, right? So I think there are a lot of these smaller actions that can be taken by managers to help uplift and identify and nurture and really develop the bench, if you will, right?
If I can jump in here, I think the other thing that we have to do is we've got to as an organization, I think that we've got to sit down and partner with HR and the recruiting teams as well, and really look at, are we going to the same old colleges that we continue to always go to do recruiting, but that don't necessarily have a large Latino base of students in them that are going to be graduating and coming out? What colleges, are we looking at the colleges that do? Are we partnering with them? Are we then going out and offering our college hire programs and actively recruiting in those areas to make sure that we are developing that pipeline? And those are the kind of actions I think that we've got to get more intentional about and holding our folks accountable for.
That's absolutely right. I know that we're, again, a few minutes out, 5 minutes out. I did want to do a quick round robin to give everybody an opportunity to say sort of a closing comment, a note of inspiration for the people that are on this call. I know we've talked about, the differences being a bridge rather than a barrier. We've talked about the importance of seeing ourselves in media and content, in ads, and how representation really matters. We've talked about the importance of non-Latino allies. How do we include, incorporate, reach out, expand our allies? Millennials, right? The next generation to challenge us and being accountable. We've talked also ideas for how to better engage our hacemos and ERGs and integrate them better into the business and hold our advisors accountable. We talked about, and very importantly, setting intentional goals and being intentional in our goals in terms of conscious inclusion and all the steps that that takes. And, you know, really partnering with HR as a first, you know, tangible step, HR and diversity, they're our partners and we're here to help. So with that, I'm going to go around and start with Miriam. If you have, you know, a closing comment, Martin, Lichia, and Pamela.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not mention ongoing education. I think that that is an area that everyone can actually take some action, and whether it's a certification, whether it is some kind of formal education, but to be constantly learning and pivoting. I mean, we are becoming more and more technology centric, and as we do, we really need to update our skills and pivot. And besides getting more education, I think we also need to turn back and give back and really educate others, whether it's your team and letting them know about your Hispanic culture and teaching that the world is a little bit more diverse than they would think, or whether it's kind of just sharing your own stories. I think that that's an opportunity for us all.
100% agree. Martin, one or two sentences as we wrap things up.
Yeah, I would say one, speak up, right? Let your intentions be known. Make sure that you get involved, whether you're getting involved with Hacemos or within your community, and then give back. And I think that give back was like kind of help pull someone back up, right? So like if you're moving up, make sure that you're pulling someone up as well. So those would be the three things.
Well said. Pamela.
I think I would finish with saying invite others that don't look like you, aren't from the same culture you're in, into the conversation. The more conversation you have, the more that they get to know the breadth of us. And we hire people we like. We buy from people we like. So I think we have to be open to allowing folks into our experience.
Excellent. Lichia.
I would say all of the above. All was very well stated. I would also like to add that I think that we should definitely continue the conversation and not just have this during Hispanic Heritage Month, but have this year round. And to speak about how are we bringing people up, how are we sponsoring people, how are we mentoring people. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about opportunities. And that's how you get to where you are.
Right. And really just in closing, you know, this notion of being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? We have to just, it's all uncharted territory. COVID has taught us that. And let's, you know, go back to some of our learnings as young children. I know many of you probably went to a Mexican birthday party with a piñata, perhaps. And,
Yes.
you know, the whole purpose of that is you're swinging at a piñata, but you're blindfolded. And I'm thinking, wow, that is one of the best skill sets that my mom could have, you know, exposed me to, because so many times in my job, I felt like I'm swinging at a piñata with the blindfold on, but there's a family and friends supporting, cheering us on. So know that you all, each and every one of you are being cheered on as we embark in this uncharted territory. But thank you. It's been such an honor and pleasure to be here on this panel, to moderate with you stellar leaders of the company. Dawn, is there anything else we need to do before we wrap up?
No, just everybody have a wonderful afternoon. Please take note of our next series, which will be running next week. You should have seen it in our noticias. So we'll have a Q blast if you utilize Q. So lots of different ways to receive that registration link. So we look forward to having everybody on our 4th of 5 series. And so Lichia has mentioned something that, you know, we kicked this off during Hispanic Heritage Month, but it is definitely a platform that is going to continue throughout the year. So thankful to everybody who's raised their hand to lead a session and to be a part of the panel. So thank you guys for your time.
And this was recorded, right, Dawn?
That is correct.
Okay, so we could share that. And
yes.
And thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Hacemos. It's been great fun with you today, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Gracias.